There seems to be a momentum shift in what the Cleveland Browns might do at the number 2 overall selection in this draft. Travis Hunter, the betting odds seem to be in his favor now. Certainly the national talk seems to be in his favor. We'll talk about it. Browns 3 on the OBR starts now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR is brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. And of course, we appreciate everybody for all the support here. 3 months strong now. Nothing but Cleveland Browns free agency and mostly Cleveland Browns draft coverage. You guys have been along for the ride. We appreciate you. Whether it is reading the written content coming on out for the nightly streaming on the OBR on, of course, YouTube, and of course, the OBR on Twitch. We are greatly, greatly appreciative to all of you. Hope you all had a great weekend. Now, it seems certainly since Friday and through the weekend that the Cleveland Browns and Travis Hunter, those odds seem, obviously, if you go by betting lines and you certainly go by, national trend, those seem to be increasing. I don't necessarily have any disbelief in Travis Hunter, the player. His film is fantastic. And again, you've heard me say it and say it a million times. Travis Hunter last year, it was not appreciated enough, and it probably will never be appreciated enough, just exactly what Travis Hunter did last season at the University of Colorado. Now, first things first, the Browns were one of the first ones to put their name on it. If they were interested in Travis Hunter, it was to be a wide receiver. I'm not going to say that there wouldn't be a chance at some point somewhere where he takes maybe some reps on the defensive side of the ball. But the belief would be you draft him and you understand that there probably still is some growth at whatever position he is going to ultimately side on. Certainly in this case, it would be the wide receiver side. You think there's still work and growth that's going to come because, you had to split your time, certainly, while he was in college. There are things that you hope the type of young man is when you're hoping that this is going to work for a player to improve. Work ethic, general type of young man he is, how important is football to him. All of these things from anyone you speak to seem to check out in regards to Travis Hunter. His life is ball. His hobbies outside of ball are fishing and video games. He will be married soon, so you're not worried about, a guy who's young, still living his life. Travis Hunter is going to be a married man soon. So, you believe all these things, that you're looking for in the type of guy that you're certainly hoping for some growth. Normally, you draft a guy at 2, you understand there may not be much growth. But with Hunter, you would think full-time wide receiver, hopefully he'll be, a season and a half, he'll be a more proven, finished product than he is now. And the product he is now is pretty, obviously, stinking good. Me personally, and look, I'm not telling everybody to view, the draft, the way you look at a draft perspective prospect. Not everybody looks at it the same way I necessarily do. That's fine. I get it. But I don't have to change the way I do this stuff, to appease the masses, no more than I would ask you guys to change the way you view it. I want every box checked. I want ideal size. In regards to wide receivers since the year 2000 that have been drafted at number 2 overall or number 3 overall, he's 2 inches shorter than those guys. It's a fact. As far as time speed, we don't know on Hunter. All of the guys that were drafted at 2 or 3 overall were really fast. Were timed as fast players. And of course, the players I am talking about, the players who went number 2 overall at the wide receiver position since 2000, Calvin Johnson, Charles Rogers. Obviously, Charles Rogers was a victim of himself, flamed out of the league rather quickly. At number 3 overall, Braylon Edwards. I'm sure Browns fans have their thoughts here. I get that. Larry Fitzgerald, Hall of Famer, along with Charles Johnson. And then the third wide receiver drafted number 3 overall, Andre Johnson, Hall of Famer. bigger guy, fast, everything, So again, for me, that's just a hesitation. That's one of the things for me. I like to have the full workup, the full report. Certainly things like Travis Hunter and the way he conducts himself, the way he carries himself, how much he cares about the game, the fact that he's just a quiet guy off the field, those certainly help and can help you overcome some of the concerns that I have. I also feel like bringing in Hunter now, again, and I've said it, it feels kind of like you're building things basically back to front as opposed to front to back. You don't know who the quarterback is going to be. And again, I've cited certainly the Bengals. It was Burrow, drafted Higgins around later, a calendar year later. You came back and you drafted Jamar Chase. You knew who your guy was, and then you identified the guys that you think will work best with your guy. I'm not saying when, the Browns, if they were to go Hunter at 2, and we all talk about the scenario and the belief that somewhere the Browns, 33 would be ideal to get the quarterback, certainly. But I don't necessarily believe they can just stay at 33 and get one of Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart. The belief would be you have to go up, but even still, the belief would be is we got to get one of 2 of these guys. So we're definitely going to make sure we go up. What would control that the most, in my opinion, is when Shedeur Sanders, if he does in fact go as the second drafted quarterback, where does he go? If the Saints, who may have a lot of interest in drafting a quarterback at number 9, although they are bringing in Ashton Genty on a visit, which is kind of interesting, but there's a lot of belief the Saints would be interested in a quarterback at 9. Now, if that is the case, and the Saints did take a quarterback at 9, and you're the Browns saying, well, what is there, 20-something picks between our next pick and only 2 quarterbacks being back, being available, that's certainly going to upgrade the significance and urgency level if you are the Browns in trying to get up to get one of those quarterbacks. I reached out, and when these things come out, that's the great thing. I've been doing this for years, having the ability to send messages, to guys who, draft is their life, draft is their living, draft is what they are paid to do. And, asking about the scenario and these guys know my thoughts on Carter and why I like Carter. And, Carter is going to be the only thing I'm essentially going to give of a prime value draft pick for the Browns this year and most likely next year. And, would there be any validity to hyping or having Hunter and the Browns hyped up right now? Would there be a reason for it? The reason, for me would be is, do the Browns think there's a way they could go from 2 to 3 or maybe even 2 to 4, still walk out of this with Abdul Carter and a little bit more draft change in their pocket, so to speak? Some said they think the Hunter and the Browns buzz is real. Some, and this is funny though, because the closer you get, normally the bigger names, they just don't give up as much. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that could be a theory. Oh, yeah, I could see that. So you certainly, get that type of, response when you ask these questions. And the other thing is I think they just talk to so many people and hear so many things, it's hard to tell what is right and, necessarily what is wrong. So we talked a couple of weeks ago and about the Browns and, was there the ability of maybe trying to smoke, send out some smoke to, get something, to go in their favor. Now, Hunter certainly could maybe do that. I think there's a lot of, the Giants definitely. And if you're the Giants, look, I don't think it's Russ or certainly not Jameis long term in New York. But I think they could maybe look at a package of Neighbors and Hunter and say, we kind of really like that. And, regardless of who the quarterback is, but between that and Tyrone Tracy last year, the ability is there to score a lot of points, even if you were doing it without your quarterback of the future, so to speak. So I think the point we are at now is we know who is not going to be the pick at number 2, and that is a quarterback. Certainly the odds are very good that Travis Hunter could be part of the Browns selection, whether it would be at 2, 3, or 4. I certainly think there's a great belief that Abdul Carter could be part of the Browns' plans at 2, 3, or 4. And if you notice the way this works usually is, one guy's name usually gets propped up a little bit more after, he's had his pro day, he's had his time, so the Browns, Kevin Stefanski was in Oxford, Mississippi. Okay, all of a sudden Jackson Dart and the Browns becomes a bigger thing. Jalen Milroe, certainly always been a connection with the Browns, certainly through Tommy Rees, but, a workout with Jalen Milroe. Okay, so that, Milroe, a lot of this turns into big convo based upon the fact that certainly the teams, and it was that guy's pro day, and that's kind of where you get into issues of whether you probably just can't, believe it for fact one way or the other. And I do just have this one caveat. If the Browns have been so good since the combine of keeping everybody on their toes, and, since the combine, we've known it was Cam Ward and Tennessee Titans. Why are the Browns all of a sudden now, 16 days or so away, all of a sudden now just having that drop, like they know who it is, and this is what the pick's going to be at 2, and is the next line that corresponds is, well, the draft starts at 3, so look, I'm not saying I'm not saying, there's not a really good chance it's Travis Hunter, but, I also believe we're in a point here now where you're certainly, you can listen to everything, but what you believe ultimately comes down to, whether or not you want to believe it, because I don't know if any of us truly can believe it. Speaking of Jackson Dart and Jalen Milroe, we're going to talk a little more about both of those guys. Stick around, Browns 3D. It's been a great relationship for the last few months, and we're super excited that we've had State Sharpening mower sales in service in Broadview Heights along for the ride with us during certainly free agency and draft season. If you're local to the Cleveland area, they're your one-stop shop for all things lawn equipment. Listen, you want to spend your Sundays watching the Browns, not cutting your grass. Let the guys at State help you get your weekend back. They specialize in both residential and commercial equipment for Turo, the brand professionals have counted on for more than 100 years. Whether you're looking for a new, dependable time cutter zero turn, genuine Toro replacement parts, or expert service from experienced technicians who keep your mower in peak condition, State has got your back. They are veteran owned. The Kane family are lifetime Clevelanders. They are lifetime Browns fans, and they are proud supporters of us here at the OBR. Again, if you are local to Cleveland, State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service in Broadview Heights is your hometown team for all your lawn equipment needs. All their info is at statesharp.com. That is STATESHARP.com. Continuing on here, Browns 3D. As always, we appreciate you all for all the support here, whether it is reading the content, of course, coming out and checking out the nightly streaming network. We will be around all draft weekend. Really excited to bring this to you. I know they did really well with it last year. And imagine there wasn't much Browns action to really talk about early on. So imagine what it could be like this year. So, I'm not telling you which channel to watch the draft on, but make sure you either have your laptop, your iPad, your phone, whatever, and join the 2025 NFL draft with us here on the OBR. Now, I think, and, I think the Sanders camp, and it's got to be tough. I think when most of the cycle, it was thought, and you guys know I didn't think it, but the thought was, that you were going to go higher. So when then you think that you're maybe going to start to go lower, you certainly wonder the reasons or this, that, or the other thing. And, it's certainly, you just don't want to see it. You know what I'm saying? It's just a really, really difficult thing. I still remember years ago, watching the draft, and me and my wife were early in our relationship or our marriage at the time. And, her watching Aaron Rodgers just sit there. And, for me, just being a draft fan, I didn't think anything of it. But he was her, and certainly you get a lot of casuals who watch the NFL draft, just watching it in her eyes, like she just felt so bad for him. So you certainly go through stuff like that as we're at this point here now. And I don't think it's going to be a long, long sit for Shedeur Sanders. I just think number 2 is, certainly out of the equation for him. And I think the Browns just feel that the return of investment on a guy like Carter or a guy like Hunter certainly gives you just an electric type of guy that they feel could be part of this team, not only 5 years, but, maybe go the path that Miles and certainly Joe Thomas did, where you put in a decade plus with this franchise and just excel. Now, the connection certainly, or the belief of the Browns still certainly very much wanting to be in the quarterback market, but maybe a little bit further down the trough than number 2 overall, which gets you to the Jalen Milroe and the Jackson Dart. Now, certainly the Browns have connections to both going all the way back to the Senior Bowl. And certainly for Jalen Milroe, the connection would go back to the fall of 2023 with Tommy Rees being the offensive coordinator at Alabama and his quarterback at the time, Jalen Milroe. You look at Milroe. And the thing with Milroe is, a lot of people, say, well, it's that he's got the positives. He has got the ridiculously strong throwing arm. He probably, not even questioned, is, he is the fastest running quarterback in the draft. The other thought would be is, and I don't care that the quarterbacks don't test anymore, whatever, they know they're fast. But, how, when he comes into the league, just how fast is he? He's probably top 4, top 3. Where exactly is he as far as, his running speed in the NFL? And I've talked about this, in the past, and, I think some people, either don't remember, but, when this whole Watson thing started, the Browns were kind of on this run of, looking for athleticism at the, quarterback position. Whether it was the Dobbs thing or, it was you remember DTR, and there was always, hey, there could be a couple of packages for DTR, and then certainly, Snoop Huntley was another one, certainly not Jameis or Joe Flacco, of course, but, there was the way you were looking at the way the Browns were bringing in quarterbacks, that there was a belief that they were looking to get more athletic at the position. So, you look at that. Now, one of the bigger negatives, certainly with Jalen Milroe, and this is something you've gotten to see, you've certainly got to see it, at the combine, a little tweak here, tweak there. It seems like you're trying to get his feet a little bit closer together, not as wide apart. And you saw for a little bit more successful showing at the combine. You saw for a little bit more successful showing at his pro day. Again, pro days, there's only so much you can give to it. You're throwing to guys that you've thrown to for years, so you know each other like the back of the hand. Obviously, everything is scripted, and you've basically done a dress rehearsal, so nothing should be new when it comes up. But you're seeing that, basically Jalen Milroe is a work in progress as far as working on his throwing motion and working on his technique with the overall premise to try to improve his accuracy. So now we know he's got a very strong arm. We know he throws a very good deep ball. We know he can run like a deer. So we also know he can throw on the run. Those are very, very big positives. Those are things that if a quarterback does not have, you cannot teach. It is God-given. You are either that or you're not. Another plus is he's close to 230 pounds. He's now going to the draft. And for a lot of people, there could be the possibility that maybe Jalen Milroe does not get drafted on Thursday night in round 1. He could possibly go to the second round. You never know. But he said yes anyway. And, with some people I've talked with, the one, that's one constant with Jalen Milroe is he is just that type of kid. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There is nothing Jalen Milroe really says no to. So even if it could possibly put him in an awkward situation where maybe he wouldn't go on the first night of the draft, he still said yes to be there. So that, definitely you like kids like that, you think, hey, I can work with that. And I think, hopefully that is something that is a plus and can help this young man gets to where he wants to be. But accuracy issues and the fact that he, is not the best, on the shorter routes certainly are issues for Jalen Milroe. That is not a question. But he has so many plus God-given attributes that if working and, continuing to refine things that help him with the little things, that's the gamble where you think you can maybe correct those flaws, improve those flaws. So, that is probably, what is the allure, certainly, for the Browns and Jalen Milroe. 1 year, completely 1 year younger than Shedeur Sanders. Jackson Dart, same deal. He will be 1 full season younger than Shedeur Sanders. Pretty good athleticism. I wouldn't say, upper, probably. And you got to keep in mind where the middle of the road is for athleticism in for quarterbacks in the NFL these days. This is legit. These guys, most of them are pretty good athletes. It's not the days back in the day, where these guys just could throw it 100 miles an hour. That part has been phased out. In youth football now, teams are usually taking their best athletes and putting them at the quarterback position. Dart, I think Jackson Dart is a really, really intriguing prospect. There are plenty of people that I talk with who have Jalen Dart as the number 2 overall quarterback in this draft. I think if you haven't gotten there yet, that you supplanted somebody, at number 2, I think this late in the game, you're not probably having anybody jump anybody as far as our rankings, because I don't know at this point. You've seen everything you can possibly see. So I don't know what's going to make you all of a sudden now rank somebody higher than somebody else 2 weeks out of the draft, certainly. But Dart can make all the throws as well. I think his arm is, I think he and Milroe both probably have a stronger arm than Shedeur. And certainly, the Browns, again, do have a little bit of a history with Jackson Dart. Certainly spent time with him at the Senior Bowl, spent some time, head coach Kevin Stefanski in Oxford, checking out Jackson Dart. So, the belief is that the Browns, and, no one will ever say exactly what maybe turned them away from the, Colorado Signal Caller to these 2 guys. But there are some reasons, and even still the 1 year difference in age probably isn't it. And again, we'll probably never know exactly what had them, not go the Shedeur Sanders route, maybe more in the route of these 2 guys, which it appears to be. There's still some trying to say there's a possibility. Maybe I don't know, or maybe it's a possibility, where they make a selection at 2, and if Shedeur does fall enough, the Browns pounce. You never know. But it looks, like the Browns seem pretty interested in, the athleticism that Dart and Milroe can bring them, and a lot of other, just God-given abilities, and they're going to willing to hopefully work on, the refinement and the technique and the weaknesses in either Dart's game or Milroe's game, and hopefully they found and finally got their guy after their tremendous swing and miss on March 17th of 2022. As we, get closer and closer here, again, about 16 days out, and you try to line up, and this is, a series I've done in the past, and we're going to continue to do here over the next couple of weeks. We're going to take the positions the Browns need, and, we're going to say, hey, here would be your option at pick 2, your pick option at 33, 67, 94, 104, et cetera, et cetera. And that'll be by position. But then there'll also be, hey, here's pick number 33. It could be a Jalen Milroe, it could be a Travion Henderson, those type of scenarios. So those have always done well. And I actually got a message yesterday, somebody asking, if that was going to be a part of the coverage this year. And I was hoping to do it. I really was. And which we will, but you have to keep in mind it was certainly different this year as far as the way the coverage was going to work, with the Browns now having again high draft compensation, and of course so much pick when you need so much conversation when you picking and needing a quarterback, and even 10 times more conversation when you hold the number 2 selection. But those are some things that we're going to work in here, over the next few weeks, as we continue to just try to give you some great Browns draft coverage here on Browns 3D on the OBR. I know there's a lot of talk about the way the rest of this works out, and for those of you that want to talk about something else besides 2, God bless you. I love you. It is not that I am enjoying pick number 2, but I think it's just so consequential for the Cleveland Browns to be successful in other avenues, and this isn't going to the steakhouse, picking out your best steak and just sitting down and eating it. This is going to Sam's Club. This is going to Costco and trying to get yourself, a grab and go here of significant proportion of talent. Again, my thinking, of course, certainly, with Carter is over the last few years, who has Myles Garrett had as running mates? 2 years as Zadarius Smith, 2 years as Jadeveon Clowney. Again, this is not me knocking on anyone that is currently in that room, whether it's an Isaiah, Zay McGuire, whether it is an Alex Wright, with Joe Tryon. I just, I think, and we'll see if they've changed, but I think the Browns like having basically a brand name next to, I guess, the national name, that is Myles Garrett. It's something they've always tried to do as far as, the guy opposite of him. And I'm not saying that a guy like McGuire isn't ready for a bigger piece of the pie, and because I'd be lying if I did. But I also do believe, that they like strength and numbers there. They don't want to have to say if Myles puts his hand up because he thinks he needs a blow. No, I don't have it. Well, if you're 75%, you're staying on the field because I don't have anybody that's 75% of Myles Garrett. They just want to be able to continue to rotate in and just get the best pass rush they possibly can at whatever they put on the field. Again, that is my opinion. It does not necessarily have to be your opinion. The running back position still, as much as I am excited and I look at the top end of this group, now you understand, that pick number 2 is pretty much spoken for, whether you're a Hunter camp or whether you are a Carter camp. 33, you figure it is in play somehow, some way for a quarterback. So then maybe you get to 67 and hopefully you still have 67. And so, Ashton Genty, not going to probably be in that market. O'Marion Hampton, probably not going to be in that market. Good chance, probably a really good chance, both Ohio State guys are gone by then. Well, luckily for the Browns, day 3 should give you some running back opportunity. Dylan Sampson's a guy I've recently mentioned from Tennessee. Certainly also, I've talked at nauseum about LaQuint Allen Jr. from Syracuse, one of my personal favorite running backs in this class. The Browns, it's not getting talked about enough, and I believe a lot of it is with the assumption that Nick Chubb is going to return. And look, the more this goes on, the more I believe that Nick Chubb will in fact return. But again, you don't necessarily know exactly what Nick is going to bring you. So Jerome Ford, Nick Chubb, and if it's me, I'm probably drafting 2 running backs in this draft as well. One of my favorites in this class, Elijah Arroyo, tight end from the University of Miami, will be in town this week. I believe it is Wednesday. He will be coming to Cleveland for a top 30 visit. He is a guy I am extremely excited about. His career, started slow, missed a lot of time at Miami. And then this past year with Cam Ward, you just got to see the whole show on display. And he turned out to be a really, really big weapon for Cam Ward. And Arroyo has really put together a nice, nice year for himself, ascended, did well, certainly in the All-Star games. Combine wasn't able to do so much, put together a nice pro day. And, now the Browns looking at a guy like this, certainly piques my interest because, again, I've told you guys a lot. I have for me, it really seems that, unfortunately, that when David Njoku, misses some time or isn't 100%, but still out there battling like the soldier he is, the Browns offense seems to suffer, without prime and, top David Njoku. So finding a way to get something out of that tight end position. And look, having 2 tight ends, it's better than having 1, right? Would be really, really something, I think the Browns would be interested in. Wide receiver, if it's Hunter, maybe you take somebody on day 3. If it's not Hunter, where does that wide receiver pick come in for the Browns? 67, 94. I'm not sure there's a lot of value with drafting another wide receiver later in the draft. The Browns have done that. That really hasn't paid the dividends they were hoping for. And again, a lot of this certainly could be contingent on where the Browns feel they're at with Cedric Tillman. Certainly a guy that looked like he was on the rise last year. Then, of course, the concussion against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday Night Football, which basically just shut down the rest of the 2024 season for Cedric Tillman. So a lot of things still going on here over the next 2+ weeks before we finally get some selections made in the 2025 NFL Draft. We will bring you all the coverage right here, certainly on the OBR. Browns 3D is brought to you by the OBR. And of course, from and brought to you by State Sharpening Mower Sales and Service. Again, we appreciate them. We appreciate all of you for following the written content every day, of course, coming on out and checking out the streaming network all night long here. You will certainly have Q after us. Quincy Carrier will be here, so make sure you don't go away, because Q always brings the goods as well. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube, and make sure, of course, that you are subscribed to the OBR on Twitch. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.